Welcome back to another episode of Life in the Sands podcast. We got Jake and Zach on the podcast today. We're excited to jump into some legacy conversations, specifically for a very well-known NBA player who has his team off to a very hot start. So we'll talk about that later. We're also going to do some NBA rapid fire. We will talk about some of the best NFL games going down the stretch now after the trade deadline. Lots of just really fun sports things happening right now. It's that time of year. So I want to thank everyone for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe. And with that, Bender, let's jump into NBA rapid fire first. And I'm going to ask the questions. You're going to answer. And then I'm going to cut you off if you take too long. Let's do it. First question. I'm wearing my Sixers hoodie because I'm just preparing for Cooper Flag. Who is the best one or two win team right now? Bucks, Sixers, Jazz, Raptors, Wizards. Who's the best one or two win team right now?
Um, Gonna keep it nice and simple on this one. I think it's the Sixers because you haven't seen them fully healthy yet. Maxi's gonna miss a couple of weeks. Joel Embiid comes back on Tuesday against the Knicks. I don't think they've had enough time to really see what their full expectations can live up to. And we have been in close games. We just haven't had enough because we're without our MVP. So
Yeah, and now Maxi's hurt for
he could use
multiple.
he could use a break after chucking up like 30 shots a game, so it's fine.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, can the Cavs challenge for the best record ever in the regular season? They're 9-0.
Best record ever? No. Hell no.
No, so they don't make it to 74 and
No. What are we
8.
talking about? The Cavs are going to be the Cavs at some point this season.
All right, all right. Who ends up as the top seed in the West right now? You have really hot starts, one loss teams in the Warriors, Suns, and Thunder right now.
I'm going to pick the Thunder. Their team chemistry is already there. They have some added pieces, and one of them they're waiting on, which is Hartenstein. So I think that team will only get better and stay consistent throughout the season. And SGA is possibly going to be the MVP this year.
So that's a great segue into my next question. Does SGA win his first MVP? And if it's not him, who is it?
I think he's going to get snubbed again. Um, I thought he should have won last year. It's
Yep.
pretty hard to be in MVP contention every year, um, just because somebody likes a different option. Like you won't ever see Joker now, I guess, for like this year.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna see Luca get his first.
Mm. Especially if the Mavs stay atop the Western Conference there and have the season that a lot of people think they're going to have. So that's fair. That makes sense. And the last question for NBA Rapid Fire Bender, way too early. Who won the cat trade?
Oh, that's so tough.
It
I'm
is.
gonna say the T-Wolves because they still have a pretty set identity, with Anthony Edwards being the key guy, whereas the New York Knicks look like they're playing through towns trying to figure it out.
Right. We talked about that last week, about how like it's really supposed to be Jalen Brunson's team, right? But now it feels like it's Cat's team. But
Which is not what they planned for, and that's not why they made the OG or Bridges trade. So now things get a little confusing over there.
yeah, identity is a problem. But speaking of identity, as long as Steph Curry is on the Warriors, they're going to be the Warriors. Buddy Hield is taking the place of Klay Thompson as the other Splash brother right now. Draymond is still there. Pod is there. Podzimski seems to be playing well and coming into his own. There's pieces in Golden State still. They're off to a really good start. If they go on and they make a playoff run, win their fifth championship, and I'm just kind of setting the stage here. Bender can take it from here, but what does that do for Steph Curry's legacy if he goes and wins his fifth championship with a Warriors squad the year after they traded Klay Thompson?
I think without Clay is when things really get interesting because you always need your Robin, right? The Warriors have the best bench in the NBA right now. Kuminga, Heald, Moody, a bunch of those guys coming off the bench right now. I believe Kevon Looney at times comes off the bench as well because they like to start Trace Jackson Davis a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the Warriors are pretty set to at least make a conference finals run this year. Um, but they look like the Warriors of old. Buddy is stepping into that Clay role nicely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he looks like he's motivated to finally have a fresh start in a system that actually works for him,
Right.
which I'm happy to see. Um, I had Steph top 20 before this year, because you can't ignore his impact.
Hmm.
But I think he's top 10 if he wins this year because it's without Clay, it's without Kevin Durant. That means he'll more than likely be the finals MVP. So add that to his resume again.
Yep.
Even another appearance again, I think counts for something for him at this point. Um, and you got to talk about like the top 10 list is all guys that have made impacts for a reason. MJ already looked at as the GOAT. Throw LeBron in there. Kobe, you got kids like practicing, literally taking shots saying Kobe. Now you're
Yep.
talking about like Shaq being the most dominant. Like guys are remembered for certain things.
Yep. You got
Guess what
Kareem
this
in there.
year?
You got Wilt in there. You got Bill Russell.
Yes.
You
So
know.
these guys are remembered for certain things. People are starting to call it Curry range now for a reason. So I want y'all to think about that for a second. But he
Mm.
will make the top 10 if he wins this year.
I like that. I like the angle of that, because you're right, like Curry range, right? Like that's for sure a thing. Because even as other players start to step out and you have LaMelo Ball and Dame or Maxey or whoever else shooting from a couple feet behind the arc, it's from Curry range. You're right. So that's a really good perspective on it. I tend to think he was already butting up against that top 10 or top 15 before this year, to be honest, just because, I mean, he has the four championships. He's the only unanimous MVP in history. And like you're saying, like the impact overall on the game is just so eye-popping. Like it's just so hard to ignore. I mean, hell, like even Shaq on his recent podcast was talking about how NBA ratings are down because everyone wants to shoot threes. Why does everyone want to shoot threes? Now you could say it's partially this like, birth of analytics and the numbers and the data that says they're more valuable shots, better than long middies, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, too, Steph was the main catalyst in showing that you could win doing that, that you could
Mhm.
win taking a lot of those shots and your team taking a lot of those shots. So, I mean, yeah, I think if they go through the Western Conference as it sits this year, they play a Mavs team that has Clay in the Western Conference Finals. I mean, that would be a
We
heck of a
we
storyline.
we talked about this last week how stacked the West is. If you get through a stacked Western Conference, whether it's the Phoenix Suns and Kevin Durant, Luca and the Mavs, Anthony Edwards and the T-Wolves, even MVP Joker and the Nuggets, like you have
Yeah,
so many levels to it. Not even talking about the Lakers, who honestly are not off to a bad start, in my opinion.
right.
Um,
They're
so there's
learning
a
each
lot of
other.
things to
Yeah,
look at, a lot of
yeah.
teams to look at.
Well, and even let's take it one step further. We had a conversation about who in the West is best fit to beat the Celtics. Steph Curry has their number.
Yeah,
Steph Curry has the
it's bad.
Celtics number. Yeah, he has their number. And they can tout all the perimeter defenders they want. They don't have a guy for Steph Curry because no one has a guy for Steph Curry. But I mean, like they have not been successful in big moments against that team. And you mentioned some of the other depth and wing pieces that they have now. They're pretty well suited to match up against the Celtics too. So we didn't even include them in that conversation about the best West teams because we didn't think the Warriors were going to get off to this kind of a start, right? Because we were talking about the Nuggets, we were talking about the Timberwolves, we were talking about the Thunder, the Mavs. How do they match up against the Celtics? Well, shit, if the Warriors see the Celtics again in the finals, I'd be nervous. I'd be nervous if I was the in Boston. I mean, that's not a good matchup for them.
It's not a good matchup. Um, yeah, we completely ignored them. We didn't
Yeah,
think they were going to start off 7-1,
right.
have the best bench in the league. Curry misses one game and they still win.
Yep.
So that goes to show that their depth is there,
Hmm.
which they have lacked in previous years, waiting for guys like Kaminga and Moody to develop. Um, I want to get back to the GOAT rankings here, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
Um, if he wins, in my head, there's guys that are like right outside the top 10 that I think he surpasses. Like I think he passes the Larry Birds, the Tim Duncans, maybe even Shaq, maybe.
It's a
So
conversation.
he might be pushing top five at that point, which is kind of crazy to say.
I mean, especially because you also have to, I mean, again, this is all in theory, right? But if they make a Western Conference Finals or a Finals run, they win it all, he gets a Finals MVP, means he's also probably in the MVP discussion again for the first time in a while. If he happens to pull all those things off, maybe a scoring title, whatever it is, I mean, yeah, like he could be pushing up into that conversation where it's like, okay, MJ, LeBron, Kobe, Kareem, Bill Russell, Steph. Like, is that? You know, like that, it gets really, really interesting.
And we have to see if things hold true. Because now, today, all of a sudden, Brian Windhorst on Get Up wants to talk about um, the Warriors are going to be like buyers at the deadline. Like they're going to
Yeah,
start making moves. And the first thing he says is they tried to trade for LeBron James last year.
I saw
Um,
that.
so they will push for a trade, whether it's Brandon Ingram or Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine. Like you might have to give up some of that bench depth, but guys like Badimski and Kuminga, I think, are expendable.
Yeah. When like we talk about the bench depth, we talk about some of those assets they have. I did pull up their roster, and I mean, we didn't even mention Kyle Anderson,
Mm.
who came over, and I think is
Slow-mo.
a really big piece, right? Slow mo. I think he's a really big piece, fits in well. Gary Payton is back and healthy. And that was a huge piece of the last time they won that championship because he's just, I mean, he's like their Pat Bev, just like
Yeah.
scrappy perimeter defender. You know you're going to get solid bench minutes. We already talked about Kuminga, talked about Podzimski, talked about Moses Moody. Kevon Looney's still there. Buddy Hield. They brought in D'Anthony Melton. We haven't talked about D'Anthony Melton. Talk about 3 and D. And then Gui Santos, Andrew Wiggins is still there. You talked about Tracy Jackson Davis. And then even a guy like Lindy Waters, who over the course of the season might develop into at least a functional kind of role player or could be packaged into whatever they want to do at the trade deadline. So there's just there's a lot there. There's a lot there. But I think when you think about the Warriors, what's difficult, especially in today's NBA landscape, is it seems like teams are so top heavy,
Hmm.
right? So it's like, do they have enough top end talent to compete with a Luca, Kyrie, and Clay, or an SGA and Chet and Jalen Williams? And do they have enough of that like top end, high tier talent to do it? The bench is obviously there, but then if you talk about going out and picking up Jimmy Butler at the trade deadline or doing something like that, I mean, it's not even a question that they're contenders.
I think it's over if they get somebody like Giannis, who is in a very interesting situation um, in Milwaukee right now. I don't know what they'd have to give up, but I think I saw something that was along the lines of Kuminga, Moody, Badimski, and picks, which I would send in a heartbeat because he makes up for Kuminga. Moody barely plays, and Badimski, like you can replace with a veteran, honestly, at that point.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the Bucks would just force the Warriors to take Doc Rivers in that trade. Maybe that would make it worth it.
That's gross. Steph Curry's actually the coach at that point.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so I mean, speaking of that, LeBron always gets this hate for like being the coach of his team, like being the GM and the coach of his team, right? How much of that do you think goes on with Steph and Steve Kerr?
Not a lot. Steph probably just goes out there and does whatever the hell he wants to.
And
And then
Steve
like
and Kerr just doesn't ever tell him not to do something because he knows it's Steph.
probably that like
I mean,
he
I
probably
just
has the longest leash I've ever
right.
seen in my life. He just goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, there's still more in my pocket." Just
Yeah,
rolls
just
it
keep
out.
growing the leash. I just
Yeah.
remember like when Steve Kerr first became the coach of the Warriors and back when Curry like was really in the prime and he was hitting behind the leg just through the legs of defenders, dribble moves, step back threes with three people around him and crossing Chris Paul and just doing all that stuff and like just watching Steve Kerr's reaction to that and him being like, no, no, no. Oh. Like the clips where he's like throwing his hands back and just like so yeah, definitely the longest
You're
I've ever seen. But something
no.
tells me that as Steph Curry has matured, I bet you there's more of that going on, especially with how fast those young guys develop.
Hmm.
It feels like Steph's a big part of the team, obviously, but a lot of that player coach in him too, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I want to backtrack because you almost got me on a tangent. Mark Jackson does not get enough credit for the way he coached that team before Steve Kerr even entered that building. He was the one that developed those guys, and then Steve Kerr's just coaching those guys. So something to think about.
Yeah, that is a very interesting topic of conversation too. Um,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, again, I mean, if Steph Curry goes and makes a run with this Warriors squad, we're talking him being cemented on that Mount Rushmore of players that impacted and changed the game. That's where we're headed if those kind of things play out.
Brief, brief answer. If he wins, what number are you putting him at?
I mean, off the top of my head, Like definitely somewhere between 5 and 10, definitely top 10. Um, I mean, like in my mind, you have again like MJ, LeBron, Kobe, Kareem, because Kareem's for me too changed the game. You got like Bill Russell in there, but then at that like those are like the five-ish names, and then like when you start getting into Shaq and Tim Duncan, that's where I would say like okay, you have an argument. So and even with those last two, with Kareem and Bill Russell, like maybe you can even start having that conversation a little bit.
I'm
So I
gonna,
mean, and when I say Mount Rushmore, there's four names on Mount Rushmore, right?
yeah,
So I think like, another MVP, finals MVP, another championship with the team he has now, going through the West, how it currently is constructed, I might give him the fourth spot. I might.
different age groups, different basketball intelligence will change people's answers. Um, because off the top of my head, I'm saying MJ, Kobe, Bron, Magic, Shaq, Steph.
I thought
Because
about Magic too, but then I leaned Kareem. But then again, it's so hard in that like once you get outside of MJ, LeBron, and Kobe,
yeah,
it's so like it's just so jumbled. And
you
like you
you
said,
could put him at number four for our age group because that's what we know,
right?
right? So
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's
But
hard.
before we transition here, I do want to promote. We do have a lot of series coming up on TikTok, and one that we're doing right now is top five most explosive NBA offenses, including the Warriors. If you just liked our discussion, that will be out tonight. But there will be more series, including NFL, maybe some MLB. Never know, but just stay tuned. We'll have more for y'all.
Yeah, definitely. And a great segue into our last topic for today, which is kind of going through five of we think best NFL games to kind of, finish out the NFL season going down the stretch here. The trade deadline is passed. We are going to have some NFL series coming out on TikTok as well. We recently did best QBs against the blitz, so make sure you go check that out. We're also probably going to do most punishing running backs to play against. So we're going to be looking at broken tackles and rushing success rate and yards after contact, all those kinds of things. So obviously, me being a Steelers fan, Najee would be on that list. Zeke would have been on that list if it was 2015 or something like that. But those would be fun series to watch, so pay attention to those. And with that, Bender, let's go through some of the games. I'm not even going to give you a chance to respond about Zeke. Let's go through some of the games to end the NFL season. I have five games here. I'm gonna rank them five through one. Five being, kind of like the obviously, still a great game, but that number one game I think would be the most entertaining to finish out the rest of the season. But at number five, I have a game happening this weekend: Steelers and Commanders. The reason I have this game is because you got a 7-2 and 6-2 team, and it's a battle of entirely strength on strength. Commanders have been really good against the run. That's what the Steelers do, obviously. Bobby Wagner, Daron Payne, all those kind of guys in the middle, Jonathan Allen, Jeremy Chin, they've all been playing really well. And then Jaden Daniels and the Commanders, they have 15 rushing touchdowns, and they have the most QB scramble yards and most first downs on QB scrambles in the entire league so far this year. The Steelers have allowed 15 yards and one first down all year on QB scrambles. So it's strength on strength all the way across the board. It's two teams that normally don't play each other as much, but I think it's just going to be really entertaining.
Entertaining as like a 13-10 final because that's like every Steelers game ever. But um,
I think the Steelers might be averaging more points per game than the Cowboys this year. I have to check on that.
shit.
I have a couple of 30
Probably.
pieces now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Um, but no, I like that matchup. Jaden Daniels, obviously an MVP candidate so far this year. I think it's his biggest test of
Yep.
the year. Against the Steelers defense, it's probably top three at this point. Um, I really like the Commanders' trade deadline move too, which was Lattimore, which solidifies that already pretty stout defense. So
Right.
um, it will be a fun game to watch if you're into real football. That's not like a 30 to 40 point like shootout.
Yep. That's going to be a
And
chess match.
we'll see what happens.
All right. Going on to game number four, we got 49ers and Cardinals in week 18. Right now, the Cardinals lead the NFC West, which is not something you normally say when you hit NFL trade deadline day. But they lead the NFC West, and they went out and they were buyers at the trade deadline. So I mean, this is gonna be interesting. That Week 18 game, the Cardinals' schedule the rest of the way is not that difficult. The Niners are obviously poised to make a run down the stretch. I think that game could be one that decides the division. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Cardinals already beat the Niners this year.
For one, this list just went to shit. Um, for two, the Niners have not been healthy all year and were not healthy for that Cardinals game. McCaffrey is back this week.
Hmm.
So you'll see how that team changes. And if he is healthy for that game, you'll see how that game changes, aka the 49ers will win that game. Um, the part that I don't like that you're missing is that the Rams are on a 3 game win streak. Um, so that's the team you actually have to look out for. I know the Cardinals look pretty solid, but the Rams are playing catch up pretty well after all those injuries they had.
Yeah, agreed. Although the Rams held pat at the trade deadline and didn't really, they weren't buyers or sellers. So it feels like the Cardinals are ready and wanting to try to make a run this year. So I think that Week 18 game will be interesting. Let's jump back 1 week to Week 17. We got a Christmas Day game between the Ravens and the Texans. I don't need to talk a lot about why that game's going to be super entertaining, but you got a couple of high-powered offenses, a couple of great coaches, a couple of great quarterbacks. Ravens, Texans, Week 17, that's going to be entertaining. On top of the fact that they both play in very competitive divisions. So that's going to determine some AFC wildcard seeding and things like that. I think they're both AFC teams.
Man, I still think there's better games than this one, to be honest with you. And I say that because CJ Stroud is struggling. I think the Ravens could blow them out. If
We're
CJ
Nico
Stroud
Collins.
doesn't get his stuff together, like as of right now, like we're not talking about like at the end of the season right now, but as of right now, that game's a blowout, in my opinion.
Interesting. Interesting. I think CJ Stroud has really struggled with no Nico Collins and no Stephon Diggs now. But I think they get that figured out by then. I think that game means a lot come Christmas Day. Another Week 17 game. Hopefully you like this one. Lions and Vikings in Week 17. Divisional opponents, late season game. Another one that feels like it'll decide playoff seeding, division winners, all that kind of stuff.
It has the potential to be a good game.
You're
Has the
like,
potential.
Sam Darnold's going to be Sam Darnold by then, dude. He's like, the Vikings are going to lose
Uh,
six in a row.
or the Vikings are, or the Lions are going to solidify the division spot beforehand already, and the Vikings will need that game to surpass the Packers.
Yeah. I mean, I
That's
was
kind of
thinking,
what I'm thinking.
I mean, I was looking at the division rankings. I was putting this together, and I struggled because the NFC North has divisional games all throughout the end of the season. But if you
Hmm.
look, I mean, like it feels like the Lions are just so dominant. They're 7-1. The Vikings are 6-2. The Packers are 6-2 or 6-3. Like it's a race, and it's going to be the rest of the season, and they all have to play each other still. So
I think they're all making the playoffs.
right, exactly. So again, like I struggle with which game out of those NFC North ones to put in, but I felt like Lions Vikings could be one of the more entertaining ones as long as both teams are healthy. And I'm really excited to see what Zadarius Smith looks like in a Lions uniform. That I'm excited.
I called that trade, by the way.
You did call that trade. And last game here, Bender. This one does not have the playoff seeding stipulations or the late season kind of thing that we've been rocking with. But anytime you put the Chiefs and the Bills in the same field, it's just chaos and ratings. And
Where's that game at?
I believe it's in Buffalo. Let me check on that real quick. But this game, I mean, Chiefs Bills, it's always fireworks,
I
and rule
agree.
changes normally come out of it after.
Apparently, yeah. You see Baker Mayfield's face after losing the toss to Mahomes last game.
Yeah.
Like, he just looked up like, "Damn it,
Yeah.
we lost."
Yeah,
But
he was distraught after losing that. But it is in Buffalo. It is in Highmark Stadium in Buffalo. So it's a late yeah, week 11.
it's gonna be a good game for several reasons. The obvious reasons you just pointed out, but if the Bills can take that game against a Chiefs team that's rolling right now, that might give them confidence if they play them again in the
Yeah.
playoffs. And
Yeah.
I don't think they've ever actually had confidence against the Chiefs.
Right. Right. I think they've always been the little brother, always been the underdog, right? And Yeah, I mean, it could be interesting. Both teams went out and got wide receiver help. They got more firepower at the deadline.
Hmm.
It's going to be a race, and the Chiefs could still be undefeated at that point.
Yeah.
So even more so if they're the team to knock them off for the first time. Whew, we'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
screw what the Chiefs already did at that point. That Bills loss looks crazy.
Uh-huh. Yep, it does. That would be the most meaningful game of the season for them at that point. But this has been another episode of Life in the Stands podcast. Got lots of fun stuff going on in the sports world. If you had to decide where Steph Curry lands if the Warriors win another championship, let us know in the comments where he would rank in your top players of all time. I want to thank everyone again for watching and listening. Remember to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we will see you on the next episode.